Chosen one, you may feel alone right now, but you're not unseen. You may be quiet, but heaven is listening. You may be weary, but you're not walking without guidance. God is keeping an eye on you, not from a distance, but from within the very steps you're taking. Every delay you faced was watched. Every prayer you whispered was heard. Every tear you didn't explain was recorded. This process you're in, it's not random, it's not punishment. It's preparation with supervision. But before we dive into this life-changing message, take a moment to pause this video and do 3 things. Hit that like button, subscribe to help us reach 20,000 subscribers, and leave a comment with the number 1. This number will send a powerful signal to the universe, amplifying the energy of this video. And if you are ready, trust me when I say that your life will never be the same. You haven't been abandoned. You've been guarded, even when you couldn't feel it, even when it seemed like heaven went silent. Because in silence, God watches your alignment. In waiting, He measures your trust. In pressure, He reveals your resilience. And while others are looking for visible signs, you've been guided by something deeper. That's not your imagination. That's divine help. There are hands keeping doors shut on purpose. There are delays that are actually protection. There are rejections that rescued you from misdirection. And through it all, God never looked away. He's watching the cracks so you don't fall through. He's monitoring your spirit so it doesn't break. He's allowing just enough resistance to make you stronger, but never enough to destroy you. Because this process is sacred. It's sifting. It's separating. It's shaping. And you're not doing it alone. So don't mistake the silence for absence. Don't misread the slowness as neglect. Divine help doesn't always shout. Sometimes it watches while you rise. Chosen one, heaven is watching you become. Not for judgment, but for timing. And when the process is complete, you won't just step into destiny, you'll walk in with the full backing of heaven. Hold steady. Keep trusting. You are under divine surveillance, not to trap you, but to help you cross safely. So when it feels like no one understands, understand this. God didn't forget you. He positioned you. You weren't buried. You were planted. And the soil you're under right now, it's not just pressure, it's divine coverage. Because what God is growing in you requires darkness before light, requires stillness before motion, requires surrender before acceleration. That's why doors seem to close right when you were ready. That's why people walked away right when you needed them most. That's why the silence stretched longer than your faith thought it could hold. But here's the truth. God was never checking the situation. He was checking you. To see if you'd still move when there was no map. To see if you'd still trust when there was no answer. To see if you'd still believe when nothing looked blessed. And you did. You kept walking with bruised knees. You kept praying with a quiet heart. You kept trusting without evidence. That's why divine help is still assigned to you. Because some help doesn't come to rescue. It comes to refine. God is keeping an eye on your integrity, on your decisions when no one's watching, on your heart posture when you don't get what you asked for. You are being watched, not for punishment, but for positioning. Because when the time comes, and it's coming, heaven will not hesitate to open what was closed. Heaven will not delay the instruction when you're ready. Heaven will not withhold what's been preserved for you, but only when you're prepared internally to hold it. Chosen one, this process was never about proving yourself to people. It was about proving your readiness to God. He's not distant. He's not distracted. He's not done. You are still under divine surveillance, still surrounded by unseen protection, still being guided in ways your eyes can't track. So stay sensitive, stay faithful, and above all, stay available. Because what God is preparing you for requires a spirit that has been seen, tested, and trusted. And that's exactly what you are becoming. And when it's time to release what's been held back, you won't need to chase it. It will find you. Because God doesn't invest this much in a vessel He doesn't intend to fill. This process has been your making, not your breaking, and even when you didn't understand the steps, He was ordering them anyway. Every no was a divine reroute. Every delay was divine timing, adjusting itself to your maturity. Every hidden season was heaven preserving your strength for the right battle. Because chosen one, you're not being prepared for the ordinary. You're being readied for impact. That's why you couldn't rush this. That's why shortcuts never worked. That's why imitation never satisfied. God is keeping an eye on you because you carry something others don't. Your process is more intense because your purpose is more precise. He's watching what you're becoming in the silence because that's what will sustain you in the spotlight. You don't need applause to be affirmed. You don't need proof to keep going. Heaven already approved you, and the process is simply bringing that approval into reality. So breathe. Don't panic when things stretch. Don't run when things feel uncertain. This is all part of the strategy. And through it all, divine help has never left your side. Even when you felt blindfolded, God's hand was on your shoulder. Even when the path disappeared, your spirit was still being led. This is not the end. This is the final alignment before movement. The final test before promotion. The final squeeze before release. Chosen one, heaven is still watching. But not just watching you survive, watching you transform. And when it's time to step forward, you won't come out empty-handed. You'll come out equipped, anointed, and completely unstoppable. Because those who are watched by God are never sent empty. And that's what this has all been about. God ensuring you don't walk into your next with hollow hands and a wounded spirit. He's not sending you forward just to be seen. He's sending you forward to shift, to heal, to establish, to carry what others drop. That's why the pressure has been unusual. That's why the warfare came before the blessing. That's why your story won't make sense until you're standing where He promised. You were never overlooked. You were hand-selected. And with selection comes scrutiny, not to expose you, but to strengthen you. Every layer that's been peeled back, every comfort that's been stripped, every illusion that's been shattered, it was all divine mercy in disguise. God saw what you didn't. He saw who couldn't go with you. He saw what you weren't ready to carry. He saw the cracks before they broke you. So instead of letting you run ahead unprepared, He slowed you down with love. Because chosen one, when you carry divine purpose, you can't afford a rushed foundation. Heaven has been building you in silence, and what is built in silence is revealed in power. You are nearing the unveiling, but it won't look like a spotlight. It will look like alignment. Doors opening without force. People showing up who speak your language. Resources flowing without you begging. Peace settling in places that once triggered you. That's the sign. That divine help is not just hovering, it's moving, going before you, surrounding behind you, and clearing paths ahead of you. This isn't the kind of help that rescues halfway. This is the kind of help that finishes what it starts. So don't retreat. Don't doubt your progress. Don't misread the silence. God is still watching, still refining, still orchestrating, and when He says now, everything will shift without strain. Because chosen one, you are never walking this road alone. You are walking it under divine surveillance, under divine strategy, and with divine help that never stops moving, until the promise becomes undeniable reality. You don't flinch at endings anymore. You've seen too many doors close, just to find better ones waiting around corners, you didn't know existed. What used to shake you now shapes you, because you've come to understand. If it left, it wasn't meant to carry you where you're going. You no longer cling to what crumbles. You let it fall, not out of apathy, but out of wisdom. This is what becoming whole feels like. Less panic, more trust, less needing to control, more space for alignment to do the work. There's a calm in you now that isn't based on circumstances. It was forged in the fire. Not given, earned. That's why you're hard to read. Not because you're hiding, but because you're not performing. You've realized your value was never tied to visibility. Your presence is powerful because it's real, and real doesn't need to advertise. You've walked through tests that had no audience, made choices no one clapped for, healed in silence with no applause. And now, you carry a kind of authority that can't be taught. It's in your posture. It's in your tone. It's in the way you don't chase what's not for you, because you've already seen what happens when you try to carry what was meant to be released. You're not bitter. You're clear. Clear about who you are. Clear about what drains you. Clear about where you're going, even if no one else sees it yet. And that clarity, it's not arrogance, it's alignment. You don't need loud moments to feel significant anymore. You don't need chaos to feel alive. You've found meaning in the quiet, in the peace, in the still becoming. And this new chapter won't require you to fight to be seen. It'll require you to stay in your frequency. The right things will find you. The right people will recognize you. The right timing will meet you. Because you no longer walk with doubt in your steps. You walk like someone who knows they're guided. You don't even respond the way you used to. Not because you don't feel, but because you've learned the difference between reaction and reverence. Between proving a point and preserving your peace. What once triggered your voice now only moves your breath. A deep inhale, a quiet exhale. Because not every battle is yours, and not every invitation deserves your energy. This is wisdom, the sacred pause before movement, the knowing that presence is louder than performance, that sometimes the strongest choice is not to fight, but to stand still and discern. You're walking in the kind of maturity that doesn't need permission, the kind that doesn't fear being misunderstood. The kind that knows your growth doesn't need to be witnessed to be valid. You've become fluent in silence, in the language of restraint, in the sound of things breaking internally before they ever shift externally, and the world doesn't know what to do with that. They expected noise, they expected resistance, but you gave them stillness, clarity, presence, and that unsettles more than shouting ever could. You've stopped asking to be chosen because you finally saw you already were. Chosen by experience, chosen by the weight you carry, chosen by the storms that couldn't break you, chosen by the vision that still kept you alive when everything went dark. This isn't just about surviving seasons. It's about becoming someone the season can't shake. You don't pray the same. You don't walk the same. You don't even dream the same. Because now, your dreams aren't rooted in fear of lack. They're rooted in trust of timing. You understand now, what's for you doesn't need force. It flows. What's divine doesn't compete. It aligns. You're no longer rushing into things just to feel worthy. You wait because you know who you are without the outcome. And that knowing, that grounded, radiant, untouchable inner knowing, is the foundation everything else will now be built upon. You started to realize that not every elevation comes with celebration. Sometimes, the higher you rise, the quieter it gets. Not because you've done something wrong, but because altitude demands isolation. You're being pulled out of the noise, not to punish you, but to preserve what's developing inside you. Growth isn't always a loud process. Sometimes it looks like disappearing. Sometimes it feels like being misunderstood, left out, or completely unseen. But what's forming in you now isn't meant to be fed by the crowd. It's being cultivated in stillness, because when it finally emerges, it won't need to announce itself. It will simply be undeniable. You don't crave validation the way you used to. You've let go of the need to be constantly affirmed, because you're starting to trust your own voice, your own spirit, your own inner compass. That's why some things no longer excite you, why some conversations feel empty, why some rooms feel smaller. Even if they're full of people, your soul has expanded, and it no longer fits into places built on small talk and surface-level living. This is the breaking away, not from others, but from the older version of yourself that tolerated confusion just to belong. Now, you'd rather be alone with truth than surrounded by people who can't hold your reality. You don't chase anymore. You attract by being rooted, by being honest, by being whole. Not perfect. This new season doesn't require performance. It requires presence. Not the kind that begs for attention, but the kind that brings peace into chaos and order into the unseen. You're not just entering new spaces. You're becoming the space. And those who are meant to walk with you, they'll find you not because you shouted, but because your stillness sent out a signal that only the aligned can hear. So if it feels lonely, don't shrink. If it feels slow, don't rush. You're not behind. You're ahead of the noise. You began to feel it before you could name it. The subtle detachment, the way old desires started fading without warning. The internal pull that kept whispering, "This no longer belongs to you." Not because you failed, but because you outgrew it. This is the part no one prepares you for. The grief that comes with becoming. When parts of your identity, once so tightly held, start falling off like autumn leaves. It's quiet, personnel, and necessary. You aren't who you were, and you're not quite who you're becoming. But that in-between space, that's where the deepest work is done. You're learning to hold space for what's leaving, without chasing it to stay. Learning to bless the seasons that built you, even if you can't bring them forward. Because if you try to cling to what's finished, you delay what's already waiting. You don't need to be fixed. You're being reformed. Your values are shifting. Your appetites are changing. Your vision is being purified. This is the thinning of your ego, the unraveling of performance, the sacred death of survival mode living. You're starting to see that silence doesn't mean absence. It means deep presence. That slowing down isn't regression. It's alignment returning to the surface. You're not behind. You're being reintroduced to yourself, without the noise, without the layers, without the pretending. And in that raw space, you're finding out that peace isn't passive. It's protective. You don't settle for what looks good anymore. You wait for what feels right in your spirit. You don't force connection. You honor energy. You don't explain your shifts, because what's sacred can't be justified to the uninitiated. You've stepped into a frequency that only those who've been through fire can recognize. And from here on out, you'll only rise with what's rooted, only walk with what's willing, only build with what's true. You stopped needing the spotlight because you realized your light was never meant to be contained. You carry something ancient, not in words, but in presence, something that unsettles the shallow and awakens the hidden in others. And it's not charisma, it's not performance, it's the residue of having gone through the dark and refusing to forget the way out. You've been called strange, quiet, distant, but that's only because they couldn't understand what it means to be sensitive in a world that rewards numbness. You walk through rooms scanning for energy, not approval. You feel before you speak. You know before it's confirmed. And you've stopped gaslighting your own instincts. just to make others comfortable. You used to think you were too much, too intense, too spiritual, too deep. But now you know, you're just tuned in. You hear the spiritual tension when no one says a word. You see the shadow behind the smile. You pick up the shift in someone's energy before they even notice it in themselves. This is not a burden. This is a gift. But only now are you starting to carry it without apology. You've seen too much, felt too deeply, lost too profoundly to keep pretending that this journey is surface level. You're not built for easy answers. You're not here to fit in. You're here to pierce through illusions. And that's why life keeps pulling you into the quiet. Because you receive clarity where others seek noise. It's not isolation, it's consecration. You're not being kept away, you're being set apart. Not to be better, but to stay clear, so you move slower now, but with more purpose. You speak less, but with more power. You expect less from people, but more from your spirit. You're no longer addicted to forward motion. You've made peace with divine timing. And because of that, you walk in a grace that can't be imitated, a depth that can't be explained, and a calling that doesn't need confirmation to be real. You've realized now, some storms weren't meant to be rebuked. They were meant to reveal you, not to destroy, but to strip, not to harm, but to harden what's soft and sacred within you. The shaking didn't come to take your purpose. It came to test its foundation. And what survived, that's who you truly are. Not the image, not the potential, not the version you built to be loved, but the core, the raw, the one that's still standing when everything else fell away. You no longer fear the wilderness, because you learned that real clarity doesn't come from comfort. It comes from collision. The moment you stopped asking, "Why me?" was the moment you stepped into real power. Not the loud kind, the kind that watches the ground shake and still says, "I will not move." That's not ego, that's spirit remembering its assignment. You've walked through things that would have silenced others. And maybe they did silence you for a while. But now, your silence is no longer the result of pain. It's the result of presence. You no longer explain your shifts. Because what's been activated in you is not up for debate. It's not for mass consumption. It's for mission. Some things don't need approval. They need protection. And you've become a guardian of energy, of truth, of what's sacred in a world that constantly tries to cheapen the sacred. You've changed the way you walk, not out of fear, but out of precision. Every step now is prayer. Every silence is strategy. Every detour is design. You don't get rattled by rejection, because now you see it clearly. Rejection was a reroute to refinement. And this refined version of you, it doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't shrink. It discerns. It moves when led. And it waits when others run. You've crossed the threshold. The old life can't call you back. And the new one, it's already unfolding. In rhythm, in whispers, in complete alignment. You don't dream the way you used to. Not because you gave up, but because your vision has matured. What once felt like ambition now feels like assignment. What once looked like chasing now looks like receiving through alignment. You've come to understand that divine timing isn't late. It's just built to stretch you first. And that stretch, it taught you patience that logic could never offer. It taught you the rhythm of trust, not based on sight, but based on spirit recognition. Now you don't need everything to make sense. You just need to feel what's real. You've stopped negotiating with your calling, stopped diluting your voice to make it easier to swallow, stopped bending in rooms that asked you to fold your essence, because you remembered who you were before you were asked to be small. And that memory, it became your fuel. You don't need to be seen anymore to feel secure. You don't need applause to validate your intuition. You don't even need clarity to stay committed. Because now you know, some of the greatest assignments come wrapped in obscurity, and what looks like a detour is often a disguise for acceleration. You've been trusted with things that don't show up in titles, with insight that doesn't come from books, with peace that doesn't come from perfect conditions. That's why you don't rush anymore, because what's for you is being tailored to your readiness, not your timeline. You've seen what rushing brings: shaky foundations, temporary validation, misaligned outcomes. So now you wait differently, not with anxiety, but with awareness. Your stillness isn't stagnation, it's strategy, because when the moment comes, and it will come, you won't just be available, you'll be undeniable. And every quiet season, every hidden day, every prayer no one heard will speak for you louder than words ever could. You no longer pray for doors to open just because they look impressive. Now you ask for the ones that are meant for you, even if they take longer to appear, because you've lived long enough to know a fast yes can cost you more than a divine no. You're not in a hurry anymore. You're not chasing timelines that were never yours to begin with. You've stepped out of the world's pace and into heaven's rhythm. And in that rhythm, there is no pressure to perform, no need to prove. Only the quiet confidence of someone who knows, what's meant for me is being aligned by the hour. You've grown past forcing things to fit. You don't water yourself down just to keep peace that doesn't include your growth. Because now you know, true peace never asks you to shrink. You walk into rooms differently, not to be seen, but to see. You read energy. You feel the atmosphere. You listen for what's not being said. That's not paranoia. That's discernment. A skill sharpened in silence. A gift forged through trial. And now, it's your compass. You're not guessing anymore. You're discerning what aligns, what drains, what expands you, and what was only there to distract you. You've become incredibly selective with your presence, not out of pride, but because your energy is sacred. You no longer fear missing out. You fear misalignment. You'd rather wait in stillness than rush into noise. You'd rather walk alone in truth than be surrounded by people who don't see your essence. You've finally accepted you are not for everyone. And that's your protection, not your problem. Because now that you've tasted alignment, nothing less will satisfy. You're not just building a life, you're becoming a frequency, a vibration that attracts what's real, repels what's false, and stands unshaken in the face of delay. And when the right door opens, you won't knock. You'll walk in like it was always yours. You started to notice it in the silence, the way your soul began to stretch in places no one could see. Not louder, not flashier, just wider, more open, more anchored. You don't crave beginnings that glitter anymore. You crave what's rooted, what lasts, what speaks to the eternal part of you, not just the temporary thrill. Because you've seen what shallow waters offer: quick highs, fragile promises, and exits disguised as open arms. You've matured past that now. You're no longer impressed by charisma without character. You're not drawn to shiny doors that don't lead anywhere. You're not moved by noise. You're moved by alignment. That's why things feel quieter now. It's not emptiness. It's refinement. Your path has narrowed, not to limit you, but to focus you, because distraction has always been the enemy of your calling. Not destruction, distraction. You're not the kind of soul that can survive in watered-down purpose. You were never meant to live diluted. You've stopped explaining your boundaries. They're not up for debate. You've stopped second-guessing your no. It's not anger, it's clarity. And clarity is expensive. It cost you people. It cost you comfort. It cost you the version of yourself that used to settle just to be accepted. But now you're here, clear, quiet, and completely untamed. Your presence feels different because you no longer carry the weight of needing to be liked. You walk with truth, and truth rarely travels with a crowd. You're not seeking a rival, you're cultivating depth. And even if it's slow, even if no one's watching, even if you build in silence for years, you've made peace with that. Because you know now, what's born in authenticity outlasts what's built for attention. You're not waiting for the world to catch up anymore. You've stepped fully into who you are, and from here on out, everything must meet you at your frequency, or not at all. You never realized how much weight you were carrying until you started to let go. Not of people, but of patterns. Not of dreams, but of distractions. Not of faith, but of the false version of it you were taught to cling to. This was never about losing everything. It was about shedding what was never part of your becoming. There's something sacred about what you've been walking through, not because it's been easy, but because you didn't quit, even when you were tired of being strong, even when nothing made sense, even when hope felt like a fading echo. You kept waking up. You kept listening. You kept moving when stillness felt safer. And whether you realize it or not, that was the victory. It's not about outcomes anymore. It's about obedience. It's not about appearances anymore. It's about alignment. You're learning that peace doesn't always come with clarity. Sometimes it comes with conviction, a quiet knowing deep in your bones that says, I'm not who I used to be, and I'm not going back. You've been led through places where maps don't work, where logic fails, where shortcuts betray you. But you've also discovered a strength that can't be stolen, a vision that doesn't depend on sight. This isn't self-help. This is soul reconstruction. It's the invisible process of becoming unshakable in a world that profits off your confusion. It's the internal fire that no applause lit and no criticism could extinguish. You've been taught by pain, refined by silence, and elevated by humility. And now, without needing to prove it, you carry something rare. You walk differently. Not louder, deeper, not faster, truer. Not seeking validation, anchored in revelation. And that's why you've been pulled back, while others are being pushed forward. Because what's on you can't be rushed. It must be rooted. There are things inside you that can't be bought, can't be copied, can't be broken by ordinary pressure. This isn't about looking chosen. You stopped trying to explain yourself because you finally understood that not everyone has the capacity to see what you carry. You've outgrown the need to be understood. You've stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. You've walked through the fire, not just to survive it, but to absorb something sacred from it. And now, you're not the same. The version of you that begged for clarity, that sought constant confirmation, that clung to what was familiar even when it was draining you. That version has quietly faded. What's rising now is different. It's quieter, but more dangerous, because it moves with intention. You no longer speak just to be heard. You speak to shift atmospheres. You don't enter rooms to take space. You hold ground. Spiritual ground. Emotional ground. Ground that others can't even name. People feel it, even if they can't articulate it. That weight, that silence that speaks louder than noise, that calm that unsettles the ones still hiding behind masks. And it's not pride, it's not ego, it's the presence you've earned through endurance. You've been pruned, not punished, stripped, not forgotten, positioned, not postponed, because what's ahead of you can only be carried by someone who's already lost everything they thought they needed and kept walking. You are that someone. You've been trusted with stillness in a world addicted to chaos. You've been trusted with vision in a time of confusion. You've been trusted with authenticity when the easy path would have been to conform. This trust wasn't random. It was witnessed every time you got back up, every time you forgave when you wanted revenge, every time you stayed soft when life tried to make you hard. Now you're a mirror, reflecting what's real, exposing what's fake, calling forth what's buried in others just by being you. This is not your peak. It's your foundation. What comes next will not feel like striving. It will feel like flow. You've noticed it, the way certain people look at you now, like something's different, but they can't name it. They sense a shift, but it doesn't fit the version of you they remember. That's because you've stepped into a frequency they no longer recognize. You're no longer living from reaction. You're moving from revelation. The lessons weren't just intellectual, they were cellular. They reshaped how you see, how you choose, how you respond. You don't rush to fix things anymore. You've realized some things aren't yours to fix. And peace, true peace, is knowing the difference. You've stopped chasing outcomes because now you understand alignment brings what striving never could. You've stopped begging for answers because now you know that clarity often follows obedience, not the other way around. There is power in this new stillness, not passivity, but restraint. You could correct them, but you stay silent. You could expose the lies, but you let the truth unravel in its own time. Because you've learned what's real doesn't rush. You're becoming the kind of presence that shifts others, not with effort, but with essence. This is spiritual maturity, not perfection, but depth. And the deeper you go, the less you need from the surface. The less noise you tolerate. The fewer people you need in your circle, just the right ones. That's why some connections fell away without warning. They didn't fail, they expired. Your current vibration is an eviction notice to anything built on pretense, fear, or dependency. You don't have to announce your growth. You embody it. You walk in with quiet eyes, but a loud spirit, and the room adjusts, even if no one understands why. You've stopped trying to explain this chapter. It's not meant to be explained. It's meant to be lived, unfolded, honored, and when it's fully formed, even those who doubted it will be forced to respect what was born in silence. You've stopped asking for the storm to pass. Now you ask for the wisdom to walk through it, because you've learned peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of alignment in the middle of it. You don't panic like you used to, not because life got easier, but because you got deeper. The fear that once ruled your decisions no longer has a voice. The pressure to prove yourself no longer has a grip, and the urge to explain your becoming has finally gone quiet. You've realized something sacred. Some things can't be explained. They must be embodied. You carry a knowing now, a steady, grounded knowing that doesn't argue, doesn't rush, doesn't chase. And that's what confuses people. They expect you to defend your path, to justify your silence, to make your evolution more palatable. But you've graduated from that. You no longer translate your journey for those unwilling to learn the language of growth. You've stopped watering down your presence for places that only tolerate you in fragments. Now it's all or nothing, because you've integrated what used to be scattered. You've pulled your power back from the places you once gave it away, and you've woven yourself whole in the solitude others tried to avoid. This is what becoming looks like. Not louder, but truer. Not more visible, but more aligned. You trust the unfolding now, even when it's slow, even when it's hidden, even when it strips you of everything that once felt safe. Because what's being built this time is unshakable. You don't need to be seen to stay faithful. You don't need a crowd to feel validated. You don't need immediate results to stay obedient. You've been called to walk with vision, not just sight, to move with conviction, not just convenience. And what's coming to you now is not a reward, it's a recognition of who you became when no one was watching.